Good morning, Kevin. Could you turn the camera off for us, please? Thank you. If you are not a commission member or could you please have your cameras off until we call you? Thank you. Okay, we are good to go. We are being recorded on Zoom and also live on YouTube.
Good morning.
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay. Good morning and welcome.
Morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the March 13th New York State Commission on Forensic Science meeting. I will note at this time that we have Rachel Singer, Chief of the Forensic Science Unit in the Kings County District Attorney's Office, joining us today. The Honorable William Fitzpatrick is unable to attend and has designated Ms. Singer to participate on his behalf. Ms. Singer will not count toward quorum nor be a voting member. At this time, I will turn it over to Ms. Palmer to run today's meeting as I am attending virtually.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll now take attendance to establish a quorum. I'd like to note that Dr. Willie is joining us remotely due to an extraordinary circumstance. Please respond present when I call your name. Lieutenant Colonel Banbury?
Present.
Mr. Epstein?
Present.
Ms. Murphy?
Present.
Dr. Willie?
Here.
Dr. Chithlin?
Present.
Ms. Goldthwait?
Present.
Ms. Roush?
Present.
Ms. DeCastro?
Present.
Dr. Marciano?
Present.
And Ms. Schmitz?
Present.
Thank you. And including Commissioner Rosado and myself, we've established a quorum today. Everyone has received the agenda for today's meeting. Is there any discussion regarding today's agenda?
I'm Beverly Roush. I'd like to add an item to the agenda today.
Okay.
There's a recent development with policy for the Department of Health regarding private forensic laboratories that I'd like to discuss.
Under new business, that would be an appropriate addition? Yes. Okay. Any other discussion today? Yes.
Yes,
Dr.
I'd like
Marciano?
to add a very brief section on finishing up the OSAC discussion that we had last meeting.
The appropriate area for that would be under old business.
Thank you.
With the addition of the DOH item under new business and the OSAC discussion under old business, is there a motion to approve the updated agenda? Dr. Ms. Schmitz? Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Roush? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or anyone abstaining? Okay, with that, the motion carries. Everyone's also received draft minutes from the December 11th informational session and the December 12th business meeting. Are there any questions or comments regarding those sets of minutes? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Motion. Okay, Mr. Epstein, a second. Ms. Schmitz. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone opposed? And any abstention? Hearing none, the motion carries. The next item we have on the agenda is executive session. Do I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters relating to the current investigation or matters that may lead to the appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, or suspension of a particular person?
So moved.
Castro, is there a second? Second. Dr. Marciano. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Yes.
Anyone abstaining? Okay, with that, at this point, if you're not a commission member or staff, you'll be placed into a virtual waiting room and the streaming will be paused. The stream will resume when executive session has ended.
Thank you. We are good to go. We are being recorded on Zoom and also live on YouTube.
Thank you. Welcome back to open session. We have two things that we're coming out of executive session with. First, I'd like to request a motion to amend today's agenda to add item 8K, a disclosure from the DCJS Latent Print Laboratory.
Motion made.
Second. Even Lydia, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstaining? And then additionally, I'm requesting a motion to establish a working group to address a complaint received by, an honest complaint received regarding the Onondaga County Center for Forensic Services.
Moved.
Aaron, a second?
Second.
Michelle, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, with that, pass the motion. And now we will go into our accreditation and laboratory updates.
I'll just add, there was no action taken during executive session.
So our first item today on the accreditation section is the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner Forensic Anthropology Unit. In November, ANAB conducted a surveillance assessment activity and there were no findings. ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on the results of this activity. The laboratory has also notified ANAB and DCJS that Dr. Jennifer Oden is now the Assistant Director of the Forensic Anthropology Unit. Are there any questions for the laboratory? Okay, seeing none. Congratulations, lab. Also, next we have the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Biology. In October, the laboratory underwent a surveillance assessment activity. There were no findings. The assessment report was provided at the December meeting, our materials. ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on the results of this activity. Are there any questions for the laboratory today? Seeing none. Next, we have the New York State Police Crime Laboratory. The laboratory has notified DCJS and ANAB that the Assistant Director, Major Michael Jankowiak, has retired effective December 30th, and Staff Inspector Mary Barrett has been appointed to the laboratory. Are there any questions for the laboratory?
I have questions.
Okay, I believe we have the director in Albany. Good morning.
Good morning.
We have some questions here. I saw two hands.
Hi, yes, good morning. This is Erin. So I had two questions. One is I was looking at the DNA subcommittee and I really appreciated Dr. Corrado, I think it was, exchange with you about sort of understandings of what the roles are, and then we had an update. And I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding correctly that you as the head of the lab remain in charge of hiring, promotion, discipline, that you are in charge of the lab, not the staff inspector. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Okay. And then the second thing is I noticed the DNA subcommittee raised a concern about not filling the assistant director position, and that at such a large lab that there might be a staffing, it might be expecting too much. And just if you had a thought about that and understanding why it's not being filled, if that's like a budget concern or if there's been a reorganization, or what led to that decision to phase that out.
We have redistributed the tasks that were assigned for the assistant lab director.
And you feel comfortable that's, people aren't taking on then too much, or that you haven't lost a key person that you need to support you?
No.
Okay, that's all.
I had a similar type question in the update letter. Oh, geez. Hi, sorry. In the update letter that we received from the New York State Police, they indicated that the duties and role had been explained to you for the staff inspector. The staff inspector Barrett's duties and role at the lab have been fully explained. Could you tell us what are the duties and role of the staff inspector with respect to the forensic laboratory?
Sure. The staff inspector now serves as my director, so I directly report to her, so she supervises me. Whereas in the past, it was Lieutenant Colonel Banbury, who is no longer in administration. But also to act as a liaison between division and the laboratory system and assist with audits that we have of the lab system involving the division and their policies, such as annual audits and overseeing the training and travel requests and filtering those through, ensuring that the procedures are followed properly for making those requests.
Is there any difference that you can divine from when you reported to the previous position to this new position? Is there a difference that you can articulate? Or is it sort of the same but with this new position?
I mean, she's physically located in our building now, whereas previously they were in the building next door. So physical location.
Thank you.
Just following up in the description that says that they would oversee the administrative operations. So were they involved in the redistribution of tasks within the laboratory? So was that seen as administrative or was that seen as technical?
In terms of the assistant lab director duties, I think there was conversation involving the quality assurance director as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Dr. Dooley? Thank you. Next is the Niagara County Sheriff's Office Forensic Laboratory. The laboratory has notified ANAB and DCJS of a change in personnel. As of March 5th, Cassie Kalia is the serology section supervisor. In February, the laboratory underwent a full ANAB reassessment, and there were no findings. During the reassessment, several changes were made to the laboratory's scope. Software was removed from physical comparison, and chemical was removed from qualitative determination in the firearms and tool marks discipline. Liquid was removed from the weight measurement in the seized drug discipline. ANAB has granted accreditation based on the results of this activity, and the director is available for questions in Albany, if there are any.
I have a comment. I do want to. Oh. Can you just direct me? I just want to commend the lab. The laboratory director did reach out to me for assistance in liaisoning with the public defender office in Niagara County. So they've now been communicating via email. But I appreciate his specific effort in communicating with the local public defense bar and opening lines of communication. So I just wanted to note that.
Any other questions or comments for Niagara? I just want to recognize the path that Niagara has been on to bring themselves into a state where they can move forward and effectively support the people of their jurisdictions. And so I congratulate them and I wish them well as they move forward with their efforts as a forensic laboratory in New York State. With that, do I have a motion to issue full renewal of New York State Forensic Laboratory accreditation to the Niagara County Sheriff's Office Forensic Laboratory concurrent with its ANAB accreditation? So moved. Yeah, second.
Second.
Mike, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining?
Abstaining as well. And speaking objection, it's just with respect to the firearm tool mark discipline.
That the motion carries. Next, the Westchester County Department of Labs and Research, Division of Forensic Toxicology. In March, the laboratory underwent a surveillance assessment activity, and there were no findings. The laboratory is awaiting their final documents from ANAB. So we will likely see this again in June. Any questions for the lab, though, at this time? Thank you. That we move to our old business. First is our familial search update. Need a second, and I will pull up numbers. Okay. Since our last meeting, we have received one new application, and 2 applications have been approved. 1 application was withdrawn, and 2 searches were completed. And that brings the totals to 84 applications in total, with 65 approved, 5 withdrawn, 13 rejected, and 1 in the review stage. And of the approved, there are 10 in the search queue, and 55 searches have been completed, 14 with no results, releasable results, and 41 with no releasable results, 14 with results. And there are 6 investigations ongoing and 8 investigations closed. Any questions regarding familial search? Next, the NIST report. At our last meeting, a motion was made to have the Biology Technical Working Group consider the recommendations made by the DNA Subcommittee's letters regarding the NIST human factors and the DNA mixture interpretation reports. The Biology Twig met in February and discussed the request. They have provided a memo acknowledging the request and providing an outline to their plan to address it. If there are questions for the BioTwig, the chairs are available to speak to it.
I have no questions. I just want to thank them for what I know is a lot of work.
All right, thank you. Next, the NextGen sequencing validation. At our last meeting, documents were provided relating to the next generation sequencing validation completed by the New York State Police. During the discussion, several questions were asked regarding the DNA Subcommittee's binding recommendation and the Commission's authority to approve the use of the technology. I'm going to turn it over to Special Counsel to the Commission to provide us a response.
Thank you, Shelley. So Ms. Murphy, during the discussion, raised several questions. I tried to summarize those questions as best I could and address them. I prepared sort of a memo for this meeting, and I'm happy to provide it to the members after the meeting. I'll sort of read a little bit from it and also paraphrase some of it. But at the December, I think it was December 4th of last year, the DNA Subcommittee issued a binding recommendation concerning the validation for the NextGen sequence. Make sure I'm on here. It was the December 12th meeting of this commission, which was the last meeting where it was discussed, and Ms. Murphy raised several questions, and ultimately upon her motion, the discussion was tabled. The questions that as I summarize them are, does the commission have the authority to approve of the use of the NextGen sequencing as proposed by the state police? And secondly, is the recommendation of the subcommittee on the validation study indeed binding? So to sort of address the first question concerning the authority of the commission, I turned to section 995B of the executive law, or sorry, section 995 subdivision 3 of the executive law, where the DNA testing methodology is defined as, I quote, means, methods, and procedures used to extract and analyze DNA material, as well as the methods, procedures, assumptions, and studies used to draw statistical inferences from the test results. In 995B, in the section subdivision 13, which is the authority of the subcommittee, it's discussed that the subcommittee shall assess and evaluate all DNA methodologies proposed to be used for forensic analysis and make reports and recommendations to the commissions as it deems necessary. Note there's not a binding. The word binding does not appear. And then if you look at sort of the very start of 995B, subdivision 1, there's a provision where it states that basically it shall not be precluded, or laboratories shall not be precluded from performing, I'm quoting, performing research and validation studies on new methodologies and technologies which may not yet be approved by the commission at the time. So as I see it as proposed by the New York State Police, NextGen sequencing appears to fit within that definition of a DNA testing methodology that is appropriately before the subcommittee and the commission. Now, the role of, I think, private databases in such methodology is certainly an issue that should be thoroughly discussed by the commission, and the commission should review whether that's something that it deems appropriate. But I would say the novelty of that issue doesn't take it outside of Article 49B of the executive law. I would say the statute even encourages the development of these types of technologies with the idea that the commission would ultimately decide whether or not they should be approved methodologies in the state. Turning, I guess, to the next question, and I should mention also there's a provision within 995B subdivision 7 where the subcommittee and the commission may establish advisory councils to discuss new technology, new methodologies as they arise. So I want to be clear also, as I state in this memo that I'll provide you, I am not, the staff is not taking a position on whether the commission should approve of such use, but I maintain that it is appropriately before this commission and it's within its authority to do so, or to not approve of it. Turning to the next question, I guess, of whether or not the recommendation of the subcommittee on the issue of the validation study is indeed binding. The vote by the subcommittee was for a binding recommendation. And I'll quote from section 995B2A, where it confers, quote, sole authority to grant, deny, review, or modify a DNA forensic laboratory accreditation through binding recommendations made by the DNA subcommittee to the commission. Should the commission disagree, it can reasonably request of the subcommittee to review it, to either revise that recommendation or to maintain that recommendation, but provide the commission with reasons why it's not making a change to that recommendation. Based on it's a validation study that is the nature of the I guess recommendation. I would argue that it is indeed a binding recommendation, appropriately within the authority of the DNA subcommittee to issue. But I also want to discuss that not all subcommittee recommendations are binding. And if you look at matter of Stevens v. New York, which is the 2023 case, that is probably I'd say the primary case on the authority of this commission and the subcommittee, it, quote, authority to promulgate binding recommendations to the commission is limited to specifically enumerated highly technical areas pertaining to, I'll emphasize, testing standards and accreditation. That's, I would say, why the validation study still appropriately would be a binding recommendation. But for new methodologies or technologies, and this would appear to be one of those, of forensic DNA testing, the commission must designate approved methodologies upon, and I'm quoting, upon the recommendation of the DNA subcommittee, which is in 995B subdivision 11. I'd also refer you to 13B for that as well. So this approval follows a recommendation, but it's not specified as binding. And based on 995B, throughout that section, having binding, using the word binding in some instances and not in others, I would interpret that to mean that that recommendation as to new methodologies is not a binding recommendation from the subcommittee. Now I should point out that recommendation has not been made to date yet. And in light of 995B11, I would recommend that the commission request a recommendation from the subcommittee as to whether NextGen should be an approved methodology beyond the specific application by the New York State Police. Doing so, I guess, would also allow for the ANAB, for ANAB to complete its review and assessment, which is ongoing. I believe, my understanding is it may be going on this month, actually, of NextGen by the state police. And then the subcommittee and the commission would have more information before it and moving forward. And again, following this meeting, I'll provide this memorandum to the members of the commission.
I see the microphone. Okay.
Thank you. That was a super helpful, and I too will appreciate the memorandum. So just a couple questions of clarification. So, one of my concerns from the last meeting was that the entire structure of the statute really contemplates STRs, and I hear your response is that it contemplates evolving methodologies, and it does so by vesting with the commission the power to adapt. But I guess that just raises two different issues, and I'm wondering if you have thoughts now, and if not, these are possibly technically legal questions, so if not, maybe we could just address them in the next meeting too. But I have a series, because as I read the statutory scheme and certainly the implementing regs, it's really set up for SDRs. It does raise a ton of questions about where is the genetic code going to be stored? Who's going to have access to it? What kind of sharing is permitted? Is it going to be a crime to share it? If it's, a crime to share an STR profile right now, is that statutory part of the regs and the code going to apply to, NGS profiles? And this is all coming from a place where I think rightly so, this state, the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals have all recognized that to authorize the government to do testing, not just of the kind of junk STRs, but of the actual coding loci that, also are used for behavioral health, for medical health, for all sorts of other uses, to allow and empower, the state police lab to do that kind of very, sensitive testing. We want to make sure there is going to be the most rigorous controls on where that data is stored, the ability to ensure it's correct, what kind of expungement power you might have, who's going to have access to it and how. And that structure exists for the STRs. And some of it comes from, of course, the federal government, what it is to be a CODIS lab and have access to CODIS and how you get qualified and whether the computer is, behind lock and key versus on my laptop. And one of my gravest concerns about this methodology is it's entirely outside of that federal government structure, right? Now, it's been traditionally outside of it because we've outsourced it to private labs. But of course, private labs, they have a whole different thing going on. Not only are they market constrained, but you can sue them a little more easily than you can sue law enforcement or the government. And so if we're going to authorize the bringing of what I consider to be incredibly sensitive technology, again, the testing of coding loci of individuals, whether through a forensic sample that's later associated or, to do a known person sample to say distinguished twins or whatever the future may hold, I want to feel very secure that this commission, in making what, again, I consider to be a legislative policy judgment, but I hear you to say you think it's administrative, is crossing every T and dotting every I to stand up what looks like the STR structure that was stood up by the federal government. What looks like a very rigorous structure for policing access and control. Because my understanding about how it's working now is that literally like people's unsecured laptops that they carry around with them that may not even have a password can have incredibly sensitive information on them because this is taking place entirely outside of any structures. So first question, if I boil down that little speech, is your understanding that the structure that the state put up in 49B to data bank persons and share information and criminalize unlawful access and all of that applicable also to NGS, and what do we have in place now to make sure that that structure is actually happening? Like, where are these samples going to be stored? Well, maybe I'll just let you answer that one, and then I can ask my second question.
Sure. So again, at the outset, I was coming at this from the perspective of overall, does this commission have the authority to even answer that question of whether it's an approved use? So that was the core of what I was trying to accomplish here. I would interpret your questions as a very central part of any discussion of whether to approve the use. If that question ultimately gets to the commission, whether the commission members are comfortable with where this is going to go, whether there's appropriate privacy safeguards. I did not feel it was appropriate for me to weigh in on that. I think that would be for you all to decide, should you, I guess, get the recommendation from the subcommittee to approve of the use.
I mean, I do think it would be helpful just as a legal matter to get your take on whether the statute contemplates that.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Which I understand to be a question you can't answer on the fly right now, but.
Well, this may have been developed, I'm pointing to the statute that I printed off. Well, it may have been, I guess, developed at the time where STR was the dominant use at the time. I would like to think that based on the language here, it was contemplated that there were going to be changes in the technology of DNA and forensics from 1995 to now. I think I do sort of emphasize on that section of subdivision 1 that sort of allows validation studies, the research into the new technologies. So I think the statute does contemplate it, not directly perhaps, but at least the idea that there would be changes.
Okay, and then the second question on that same vein, I know this is going to sound a little inflammatory, but I think we need to think about these things, is do you think there are any limits on what this commission is empowered to approve by way of DNA testing? So if we were to say, be asked to, I understand that's not what's being asked now, but if, they collect all these NGS samples and then really good scientific research comes out that shows you can predict violence, you can predict impulsivity, you can predict, addiction or sexual deviance, and a prosecutor's office understandably says, it would be really helpful in determining what sentence to ask or whether to deny parole or what have you, that we have that information. Is our commission empowered to make a determination about behavioral health, family structures, parentage, things like that, under your read of new methodologies?
So
Objection, speculative.
I know, I can't help but talk like a lawyer. I'm sorry for that. But it's a genuine question I have, because I know that within the statute, there are limits that are medical and disease propensity. So my reading of the statute says if a prosecutor or a police department wanted to say, does someone have a propensity to cancer, the statute has a clear limitation that says they can't do that. I also, however, know that sometimes those things get a little blurred. Like when we do phenotyping, sometimes they do look cleft palate. Is that a disease or a medical condition, or is that a physical trait of a person? And part of this methodology does do phenotypic testing, right? Like that is part of what FIG is for, is to do physical characteristics of an individual. And so to me, if we're doing physical characteristics of an individual, or if we're empowering that potentially, and we consider that something within the purview of this commission to decide, it's not hard to get from there to say behavioral health. And I certainly think, people would be interested in that. I don't think it's inconceivable to imagine that that's not information people would look for. We already do a lot of that with very crude risk instruments. So it's not at all inconceivable that someone would say, hey, we have this risk instrument for violence or risk instrument for sexual deviance, and it's got this, rate of error. And here now we have this wonderful genetic test, which is a much better rate of, lower rate of error. So I don't think it's absurd to imagine. It feels, and that research is happening now, and some of it's quite credible. So
I appreciate, I think, trying to imagine where this could end up going. For this exercise, I focused on what we had before us with NextGen as proposed by the New York State Police. I think to answer your questions, we'd have to consider whether the limits that are placed on the commission through the focus on forensics and forensic laboratory review of, I should say, the performing forensic testing on evidence in a criminal investigation or proceeding, which I think the commission's authority is not limited. I guess is how I would leave it. But in terms of to your specific examples, I focus on what we had before us here.
I think it would be, if we decide to go forward, I think it'd be helpful to have a clear statement of our understanding of our legal scope here. And I say that in part because for some people probably, for some people it may determine whether this feels like a good path to go down. And I also say it because I think it's really important to understand the stakes of what we're doing and what we think, so if the commission's understanding is no, when we say DNA methodologies in this statute, we understand ourselves not to have the authority to do that. I think a clear statement needs to be made by the commission that when we're approving NGS, this is not part of what we're approving. Because I think if we leave it kind of ambiguous, we will land somewhere we don't want to be with where the technology is pushed. Or we should be walking with clear eyes, let's put it that way. So I think it would be helpful to know, like, what are the outer boundaries of what the commission's authorized to approve as a new forensic DNA methodology, if it's not going to be limited in the way heretofore it has been, which is junk DNA, STRs, and now we're embarking on this kind of brave new world of actual genetic SNPs type, actual coding loci SNPs.
Yes, Mike.
So, so you're saying to understand the scope of how it's going to be used?
Not how it's going to be used now, because I don't understand anybody to be asking that now. It's more to understand what we're authorizing when we say yes. If we say,
Fair.
yeah, you can use NGS, I think we need to be crystal clear both about what we think our authority is. So for instance, the statute itself says it may not be used basically to do genetic disease or medical conditions, right? Now that's very vague language, genetic disease or medical conditions. And to take a very basic example that happens right now in the world, what is cleft palate? It's a medical condition. It could be a genetic disease, but if it's used just to help construct someone's face, to know what someone's face looks like, is that for medical purposes or is that just for phenotypic characteristics, right? This is a technology that already does facial composition. I mean, this is not cutting edge, it's happening right now. So, I think we should be crystal clear if we say we have the authority to approve NGS, and that's because of the reading that we heard. We should be very clear of when we approve NGS, we underscore genetic disease, medical condition not allowed. And then for me, I want to know, is behavioral, do we as a commission have the authority to be approving that or not? Is that our understanding of what we have the authority to approve? Because I don't think we can look at, especially because I agree with the reading that says the committee's recommendation is only about technical matters. I think Stevens is unambiguous about that they only can do technical matters, which also makes sense because they are a body of technical expertise scientists, and this is a policy question. This is a question that trades, public safety, privacy, all these things that are very, frankly, in my opinion, above our pay grade. But it's a deep policy question. And so it makes sense that our commission is, if the subcommittee says, hey, this is actually a legitimate technology and it works, and, we think we should think about using it, then we take that and open up the bigger questions of, is this a road we should be going down? Do we want to do this? What are the trade-offs of all these other values that might be in play? Are we ensuring this privacy, data security, and all the other stuff that the rest of the statute, is part of? But a very open question, because it's a very different kind of technology, is, I think, what kind of things do we imagine when we say you're allowed to do NGS?
So,
Mike, can you just turn
yeah. So I think a lot of that's valid. The first, I'm a DNA person, and I'm a big proponent of NGS. And we have approved NGS, right? That's just sequencing, right? MITO is being done now. So this is more narrow in scope, right, as to the target loci, the target DNA that's being used. One thing that, I think is important is that private labs this could be outsourced to private labs right now, and this would be under the purview of the commission, right? So to me, that's a good thing, right? But can we narrow the scope of what we approve based on a conversation with the New York State Police and the scope that they're proposing to use it, right? And leave questions beyond that outside of our current approval. Does that make sense?
I definitely think we can approve or not approve a certain use case.
Right.
But I would like a legal answer, because to me, I would like to know, does the law bind us to limit our scope, or are we limiting our scope as a matter of discretion? And I think that's a really important question to answer. And I think it's important for the labs to know also, because if they have this technology in-house, in my dream world, they're also all legal experts who 10 years from now understand this conversation took place. But in the reality world, when something happens, they may not even know, they may not even know the statute says you can't use it for medical conditions, right? Like, this is technical legal stuff. So I think it's really clear. It's important that we as a commission are clear on what the scope of our authority is and what we understand the statute to say we are allowed to do, but also not allowed to do. And I do understand that we send things out now and all of that, but I just think there is a massive difference between, I mean, everything from what it means procurement wise, you know, from bringing it in-house as an expertise in-house.
Are there any comments in Albany or Dr. Willie?
I mean, my comments would just be that it feels like it goes beyond just this one piece of law, right? And so as contemplated, Aaron, I think it just, like, how do we ensure that it doesn't become an academic exercise? Because, right, there are other protections in law beyond just the commission's executive law provisions that I think are at play. And so I do worry about the scope of what you asked for, like becoming an exercise and trying to boil the ocean. When you try to say all the things we can't do, I think it could be, I don't want it to be an academic exercise, right? I think this has real world implications as you've kind of outlined. So maybe the best course of action is to like look at the legal memo that's prepared right now and then see if like what are the next level of questions that get to some of the boundaries and scope that you're discussing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have two concrete questions. And one is, do we imagine that the statute's governance scheme for STRs is portaged onto NGS? You know, is that entire governance scheme going to be stood up for NGS samples, essentially, when brought in-house, including the punishment for unlawful sharing and so forth? And then the second question would be, when we have the conclusion that DNA methodologies are, that this commission has the power to approve new DNA methodologies, what, if any, limits are there on what a DNA methodology is? And I would specifically focus on things like behavioral health, which is not named specifically in the statute, and I think is a really important category. And I might also include family structure.
Yeah, I think the first one is certainly seems like the most germane kind of legal answer that we could expand the memo to account for. And the second one, I think, I don't know, Matt or Colleen, if you have other thoughts on how we, you know, I think that it is both technical and legal.
I think not. I don't want to speak before a proper review.
But those are questions, I think those are legitimate questions, without a doubt. That being said, we're looking at the validation in scope right now of New York State Police as a part of this, right? And so should this preclude us from approving the use of NGS through an approved validation by the DNA subcommittee based on, I hope I'm not word salad here, but based on the current scope of use that the New York State Police is approving or is seeking approval for?
I mean, I would say yes. You know, if we get down this road, I feel at minimum, I would ask this commission to do what it did for familial searching, which I think was beneficial in the Stevens case, which is to hold a public hearing in which we invite, I mean, I said at the last meeting, and I feel right now, my chair is the privacy chair. I'm not even the law chair, right? It's the privacy chair. So I feel a deep sense of responsibility in the statutory structure to be the person articulating what I consider to be grave concerns to personal privacy of this technology. And I don't feel at all equipped to represent the full spectrum of those concerns, just my narrow lane of privacy, right? And I'm sure even the prosecutor's office would benefit from having people talk about the benefits to public safety, and the defense bar would like to have their word on the concerns about defending in these cases or what have you. And so I think that at minimum, as we did with familial searching, which again was really just an extension of SDRs. I mean, it was just an application extension. It was not a really different in kind beast, right? Having more input than just, and more expertise than just this room to make the trade-offs that in Stevens they say this commission is supposed to be making, you know, I think would be invaluable. And I will say that in Stevens, the court says the composition of the commission, you know, is meant to reflect the different trade-offs that go into a decision of this kind. And I think it was helpful that there was a hearing that was able to articulate some of those values. And what comes out of that in hope is a menu for us as a commission approving not just technical competence, but a new methodology, like a set of things to be thinking about and concerned about and ensure are in place, not just to make sure it's accurate, but to make sure all those other values are also represented. I mean, I'll just give one concrete example too from the other side, as it were, but like, you know, victims may have feelings about having their genetic code tested. You know, these are forensic samples that are coming in, and we may think they're perpetrators, but there might be victims. You know, it's not just a kind of defense-y idea here. This is really intrusive stuff. And I think if you're, you know, imagining, oh, well, the whole STR structure that we've come to rely on and that's really excellent at safeguarding privacy, ensuring accuracy, and so forth is going to be in place. None of that is in place for what I consider a far more sensitive technology.
Would we be able to hear from the state police to see if they have, I mean, information they could give, knowledge they could give on how they're planning on using it, if they have anything to address based on this conversation, or is that premature?
I don't know if they would today. I tend to doubt if we asked them today, they would. I don't want to speak for the state police, but I don't think they were under the impression they were going to be probably questioned in that area. I think
The director is here. So.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to just clarify a couple of things for Aaron in terms of, I don't want you to misrepresent that we're out here doing NGS profiles on victims when that clearly is not the case. If you read the validation and you understand the scrutiny and the process and workflow that we have, that would have been weeded out through our initial STR phase testing, right? Like that's not something that we would do. There are certain thresholds and scrutiny that we're going to give to a case proceeding to the NGS process. And I think that's being missed. I also think that if you've read the validation, you're missing that the data that we, by the way, we do understand and are aware are not to be used for health purposes and what the law says, because we are trained on that. That that's not information that we're decoding and that we're utilizing. And that's also not information that we're giving out to law enforcement agencies when we do NGS testing. We were asked specific questions at the subcommittee that said, are you using this for phenotypic purposes? No, we are not.
So just a couple follow-ups then. So you wouldn't even send it out. I know that you don't do phenotyping, but you wouldn't send it out to Parabon or whoever to do, or Othram, or to do phenotypic testing, you're saying?
That is not within our policy, no, and that is not within this validation, no.
And when you do an NGS sample, where will it be stored?
Stored in terms of what? The extraction, the wet lab work, the data side of things. What are we talking about? Because there's a lot of variables and you're generalizing.
Well, all of it, but let's just drill down to what is essentially the profile itself, the actual data file. What database will those be stored in?
They're uploaded to GEDmatch, to the GEDmatch database.
But uploaded to a database suggests they exist somewhere in the world, and then they get uploaded to a public open source database, GEDmatch. I have problems with that too, you'll be surprised, I'm sure, to hear. But before you upload it, where's it being uploaded from?
From our internal systems that are secure and accredited, and we have measures in place to ensure that data is safe. I mean, we house the DNA data bank for the state system, right? We understand the security levels that must be present for DNA information.
I appreciate that as a matter of discretion, you're taking it seriously and representing you would treat it akin to STRs or the STR structure. I'm looking for both legal clarity about that and formal procedural clarity on both those points. I think that if we are essentially standing up, even within one New York lab, an NGS database, it should be crystal clear what the rules are about storing information there, correcting information in it, access to other places, what's lawful and unlawful sharing of that data, you know, an entire structure that's absent because we've depended on the federal regulatory structure and our statute to do that, and the implementing regs to do that for STRs, but those are all missing here. I don't think that should be left to laboratory director discretion, as much as I appreciate that those laboratory directors might be acting in good faith and doing an excellent job.
But we're not setting up a database, right? I mean, we being the state, there's not a database being stood up.
If we are NGS typing profiles and keeping them somewhere that you can press upload, that's a database. What, I mean, if you're telling me it's not a database because it's just on whatever analysts who happen to do its hard drive in their LIMS system, I hope we're standing up a database, like we're typing a bunch of forensic samples.
I wouldn't technically call it a database. I call it just a file storage location, right? Because it's not being searchable, right?
Fair. If
Right.
you, I mean, I feel like we're just arguing over nomenclature. If we're standing up a file saving system for NGS profiles, I want to have clarity on what are the rules and regulations about that. You know, again, I just go back to like the federal government when they stood up CODIS, did an enormous amount of work to like ensure the security of that data, to ensure the people who's accessing it are, you know, properly trained, to make sure that it's not easily hacked or what have you. And now we're essentially in-house going to be standing up a mini version of that on something that I consider far more sensitive. And these are, I think, really important questions to answer. I'm not even sure when I read the statute and it says, you know, it's unlawful to share for an authorized user. I don't know whether that means what that means. I do know that genealogists routinely violate the terms of service of these platforms that say you cannot use my platform to do this, and they just do. So I would want to make it crystal clear, if a genealogist working for New York does that, that's a crime that you can be prosecuted for, right? And so I just think it's really critical that we have clarity on what the rules are. And we don't have, you know, Maryland has an entire regulatory structure for this, through statute, I should add. We don't have that. If we had a regulatory structure in the state statutes, I'd say, okay, now we're dealing with questions of quality control, you know. But I do not feel comfortable as a commission with the amount and scope of trade-offs, decision-making that has to take place. And if you're telling me, well, you know, that's what we're going to do because the statute allows it, I want to do a good job.
If I could just bring you into the lab reality part of this, though, is labs are required to have SOPs, where that data is stored, who has access to it, where they, the entire process. And then New York State has asked ANEB to come in and look at those SOPs. So that is really ingrained already in our systems. And while I understand you're talking about the outside world, on the inside, a lab would have the same documentation for NGS as they would for STRs, because that's required for us. We can't just willy-nilly and not tell our accrediting body where we're storing this data or how we're accessing it or who's accessing it and what we're doing with that. So please understand that from the internal end, there are already requirements in place for us to have that documentation and those levels of security and checks and balances. It doesn't matter if it's NGS, STR, ABC, right? Like that is what ANEB's purpose is. That is what we follow. And those are the documents that we get from ANEB when they come in and they assess us.
I totally get that. And again, this is not meant to like attack, this is not at all about whether a lab can perform the technology competently or whether, you know, there's good actors or bad actors or what have you. It's about whether all of that is a discretionary matter that could vary lab to lab. It could vary according, I mean, ANAB says you have to have a rule about access, but my understanding is they don't say this is what the rule has to be, right? So I care about what the rule is here. And we, again, have had constraints from the federal structure when it comes to STRs. We don't have those constraints when it comes to NGS, and I'm not comfortable with both the absence of clear statements about what's the substance of the rules about access or sharing or what have you, or leaving it to individual variation and discretion, even if people would do a great job. Like, it's not like we shouldn't leave it to discretion because they might do a terrible job. It's we shouldn't leave it to discretion because this is really sensitive information. And if this commission's empowered to say that the state can collect it, we want to make sure the rules about collecting it are crystal clear, because reasonable people might disagree. I mean, at the very basic level, it's about whether this entire structure, 49B governs all of this, and what that looks like and how it looks.
Action coming out of this
I
then.
guess I can try to, Colleen and I can discuss those questions and try to address them at the next meeting.
Should we also request the policy on data storage that the state police is using? Would that help us?
I mean, I think
Currently,
if we're going to go forward, I do think it would be helpful to have a clear articulation, not because I think we have to defer to it in any way, but because it might be the beginning of a baseline for what we as a commission would expect. But I also feel very strongly we should have a public hearing. I just think that before we were to make a judgment of this scope and kind, there should be opportunities for the different constituencies to raise concern. I think there's a whole we don't, haven't heard from our health representatives, but I've been in meetings with people from the National Institutes of Health, for instance, that really don't like this technology because it scares people to do health-related genetic testing, and it also dissuades research. So they say, yeah, I get you're going to solve a murder, but I can't cure cancer because of this, and I think there's real trade-offs in the health space about what does it mean if people don't want to go and have genetic testing for disease because they're afraid law enforcement is going to somehow get involved? Or what does it mean to be a researcher trying to collect samples so you can do research in genetics, and whole populations are like, I'm not giving my DNA because even though you tell me it's about cancer in my community, I know what they do with it by the police. So I do worry that there are, again, values. That's not my lane, but there are values that we're not hearing that we should hear as a commission.
Is there a motion for a hearing?
I mean, I don't know if we're there yet. That feels like we need to answer some more questions, and then, because before we have a hearing, I think we'd have to, at the hearing, say this is what is being proposed, which would include the data bank structure. I can't imagine a hearing's going to go that well if it's like, we're just going to collect it and throw it on a...
If you're equating it to familial, though, it was hearing first, structure second.
But familial had a structure. Like, familial was within the STR structure, right? Like, the policies that had to be developed were about how the police investigate and so forth. It wasn't the actual, like, the familial searches were taking place within state databases that were stood up and regulated under this provision. And that, it wasn't like what we're doing now, which is an open source public database that we're going to upload people's genetic codes to. And then we're going to, somewhere in our state police, keep that genetic code. Like, that's a very different set of privacy related concerns, right? I mean, there's a whole set of questions around policy of like, after you upload it to GEDmatch, do you delete it when you're done, or do you keep it in there? What about like everything you've created? Do you have to hand that over in discovery? Is the defense now going to be out there like doing their own little parallel world? I know the Innocence Project people have thoughts on this because they like this technology to help solve, exoneration cases. At the same time, a lot of people aren't comfortable with the idea of, the Innocence Project or defense lawyers defense lawyers might be like, give me that in discovery so I can go out and do my own little searches in the GEDmatch database. And maybe people are like, I don't love that. I don't love defense lawyers poking around genetic databases. So I think all of that should be heard from. In addition, my understanding is, for instance, Ancestry has now totally cut off access to their record files. So that makes it a lot harder to do these investigations. I'm sure there's fiscal and other kind of values we should have heard or represented at the hearing. But I think before we even get to that point, we should, answer some of these other questions so we have a sense of what the structures that we believe are in place are going to be at a minimum.
I'd just like to endorse from the standpoint of taking this, taking a deliberate approach, because I do remember it may have even been my first commission meeting, may have been that public hearing.
Trial by fire.
Yeah, and I do remember my own reticence in familial searching and what that meant at that stage. And I can say that with the passage of time and the way it has been administered and the fact that it has been very deliberate and very contained, that I feel like we've administered that transition to familial in a very a way that recognizes what the ramifications are for doing that type of searching. So if we were going to do that in a framework that is under the federal and state, database and has those protections, then I think that at the very least we should be looking at something similar, because it's not under the control of the STR databases, the CODIS databases that we're all familiar and comfortable with. This is taking it outside of what we do now, and so to have the public be aware of what's coming next, I think it's fair to raise that issue. And it's not to say that I'm saying no, but I think that we did a good job in getting familial searching up and running. So I think that, raising these concerns is right and fair, and, we should continue to have a discussion. And again, yeah, it was a real trial by fire, but as far as being involved with it and bringing all of these disparate voices to the table to talk about it, I think it's an important thing. So I wanted to support your point of view in that regard.
I agree with your point of view as well, but I do want to make sure we have a very clear distinction between, NGS for mitochondrial DNA sequencing, NGS for STR sequencing, right? And then these, Contelligence is the kit, right? But in this type of sequencing, it's all three of those are very different, right? And we're really talking about the Contelligence or the sequencing that is associated with genetic genealogy in the most relatable sense, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. But again, like that's even level, I mean, I know that about mitochondrial, but even that is the level of sophistication I think we need to start thinking at.
Fun? Yep, we'll get some
We'll
more
look into
answers.
those questions.
Yep. Okay, so now we have the additional item that we added at the agenda setting with the OSAC conversation.
This will be brief, I hope. In my head, it is.
So is mine.
Yeah. So all I wanted to do was propose, and I brought this up at the last meeting, was to propose that the commission for essentially for historical records communicate to the labs that we first are very grateful for the commitment to quality and the substantial amount of work that they did to assess their systems against the OSAC standards, which I know was a lot of work. And then second, to recommend, not require, that the labs continue to review and implement applicable OSAC standards based on the value to their own individual systems. This is just a recommendation. Again, leaves it in the lab's court, but at least it does have an endorsement from the commission, who does oversee quality, and also does acknowledge the amount of work that they did in preparing this.
I would add that acknowledge that they've committed to continuing to work with OFS on the annual survey.
Yes,
that
sure.
we took
Yep.
that as our action item, and we are working on that. So in December, we'll have a report out every year.
And I'm happy to write a draft and send it to whomever. I guess that would be a motion then?
Second?
Yeah, I guess that would be a motion, yes.
So for historical purposes, to send a communication summary.
Dr. Willie has her hand up.
Well, I'm thoroughly comfortable with the thank you for making your effort. I'm not comfortable with making a recommendation, even if it's voluntary. We have an accrediting system. We have an accrediting system with standards. Why are we asking the labs to do more work?
Other comments or? So are you making a motion?
Yes.
I heard a second, Aaron.
Could you repeat the motion for Albany?
Yes. Do you want to?
Sure. This would be to write a letter, a letter, to acknowledge the lab's commitment to quality and the substantial amount of work that they did in this gap analysis, and to recommend that labs continue to review and implement applicable OSAC standards based on the value to their own individual systems, quality systems. And Shelley, it was the commitment to the ongoing review, the annual review with DCJS.
As requested by the commission.
As requested by the commission.
At the last meeting. Yes. We can put the dates in it. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone abstaining? One. With that, the motion passes. Okay. That was short. Thank you. On to new business, the 2025 annual lab summaries. As most of you are aware, that this is the annual OFS document that we keep to make sure that we are in receipt of all documents that are related to accreditation and the communications related to accreditation from each laboratory. It's reviewed by the lab, signed off by director or quality manager to confirm that all of the communications were provided to OFS and forwarded appropriately to commission and subcommittee. So that's kind of the summary of our year in OFS that everyone gets to see. A lot of work goes into it, and I just want to acknowledge and thank my staff for what they do kind of all year long to make sure that that comes together. So thank you. Next, we have an application for accreditation. So as you were aware, Executive Law 995 was amended in 2021 to include police agencies examining latent fingerprints in the definition of a forensic laboratory. As such, the agencies wishing to continue testing were required to obtain accreditation by September 1st of 2026 and be subject to the oversight of the commission. We've received our first agency to receive external communication this year, and they're on the agenda today. It's anticipated that a few additional agencies will be applying for New York State accreditation this year. And actually, I just acknowledge that we did receive one of those very late last night. So we did not add a late document, a late document, but I acknowledge that you will see another lab in June. So we have the Suffolk County Police Department Identification Section Fingerprint Lab. And in February, the lab applied for New York State accreditation. They've provided documentation from ANAB, including the notification of accreditation, their certificate of accreditation, their scope, their assessment report, and their activity plan. The lab has also supplied their organizational chart. If there's any questions for the lab, we have members present today to answer any questions.
I would also like to make a comment.
Sure. I don't know if the director would like to come to the table. This is kind of what we do. And then pop up the green button.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. I just want to congratulate your department for the amount of work it took as a lab. I understand going ISO 17025, the commitment, the amount of work, the paperwork, the dotting the i's, the crossing the t's, the writing up procedures that may have just been naturally done before and now they actually have to be in writing. Looks like you guys did a great job, so congratulations on that. It's a lot of work.
I just have one question. I think the answer is going to be yes, it'll be easy. But does your section follow the NYCLAC report standardization projects guidance on testimony about latent print matches? So they have like a list of things to say and not say. Right.
Yes, we currently follow.
Great. That's the only question. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you. Oh, actually, sorry. Are you in the process of reviewing OSAC standards, or are there any OSAC standards that you're voluntarily complying with?
We're in the process of reviewing that. Say that we're following any of those.
Okay, thank you.
So and from OFS, on our end, once they are accredited by this commission, we provide a lot of information that they have not necessarily had and worked with. So NICLAC information, the OSAC from December information, the new letter that we're going to send. We'll memorialize it all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so with that, is there a motion to grant New York State Forensic Laboratory accreditation to the Suffolk County Police Department Identification Section Fingerprint Laboratory in the discipline of Friction Ridge concurrent with their ANAB accreditation? Lydia, second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, with that, the motion carries and you're now newly accredited. Welcome to the. Next, we have the amendment to the agenda from the Department of Health. Bev, if you'd like to.
Great, yes. Just wanted to, this is informational only. Recently the authority of the Department of Health to oversee private forensic laboratories the policy has changed based on the court ruling from the Suffolk County Supreme Court regarding the applicability of Public Health Law Section 574 on forensic laboratories performing testing in the support of criminal investigations. So we are no longer under that new court ruling that sets case law and precedent. We are no longer overseeing and regulating those entities.
Okay. Comments or questions? I see someone going for a button. I have multiple buttons. Erin, I saw you first. Are you ready? Okay. Okay. Mike, Michelle.
So just for clarification, a private lab can come in and do forensic testing and no longer need a permit by the Department of Health?
That is correct.
The first thing that hits, comes to my head is that this is very concerning because of not the good players, right? But the potential of rogue labs coming in, or rogue individuals that aren't practicing good science, which I think has been seen before, and what the implications are for that. I mean, this definitely concerns me in terms of quality.
What was the case that was referenced?
It was the Rex Howerman case.
Right.
Suffolk County Supreme Court.
The trial.
There was an opinion about there was a motion to suppress evidence, and the court opinion determined that Section 574 of Public Health Law was not applicable to forensic laboratories performing testing for criminal investigations.
That was a trial court decision, right? And there's no appellate authority. And is that case going up on appeal?
It's just at the hearing stage.
Right,
They
right.
haven't
No,
had a
there's
trial
no
yet.
interlocutory. That's right, right. Well, that's really concerning.
I think, and Bev, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the ruling said that they still need accreditation, just not a permit from us.
The ruling was specific to the applicability of public health law. Most forensic laboratories are going to have to be able to testify and have their evidence presented in court that have to be accredited or go through whatever respective hearings are necessary to get that evidence entered into the trial, into the court.
But isn't that must be accredited for public health laws or public health labs? I mean, I'm sorry, public labs, public forensic labs. I don't think we have anything over private labs. Like I don't. It's my understanding the law does not cover private. It's only public.
All right, then it becomes a matter for the court.
There would be evidentiary issues on a case-by-case basis to establish the foundation of the testimony for a lab that's not accredited on an individual case-by-case basis, but that doesn't do anything to ensure that the bigger picture is taken care of and the quality of the work. In cases that don't go to litigation and they don't have an application for the admission, I mean, the vast majority of testing is done and there's never any litigation for it. So the fact that a court can be a gatekeeper on whether it gets into evidence or not doesn't really satisfy our concern, my concern. I would imagine this commission's concern that the quality of the lab is being measured by some standard. That's
So I believe the ruling said something in the terms of this is what they are accredited to do. So whether they have a permit or not, this is what they do on a daily basis. I'm paraphrasing. There was something along those terms. So it did seem to me that it would require them to be an accredited lab of some kind, but again, that's for the lawyers to determine.
That's up to the court.
Yeah.
Correct.
well, not the court. Has the Department of Health consulted with the Attorney General's office on this issue?
We consulted through our Division of Legal Affairs and through the Executive Chamber.
I'm deeply troubled as well. I agree with everything that's been said, as well as this seems to create a terrible incentive to hollow out our public lab system because it's way more expensive to run an accredited, competent lab than to outsource to the first rando who promises they're doing good testing, as Elizabeth Holmes will tell you. So I think this is deeply troubling. I'm also, I think, picking up on Steve's comments. I'm concerned this is a really significant statewide decision to make on the basis of a single trial court in Suffolk County. Like that is not how I would usually imagine like a massive shift like this would be made. So I'm wondering what your internal people said about like making such a profound change on the basis of that one motion to suppress in Suffolk County.
There is a provision in public health law that says that if there's a decision made by a court of competent jurisdiction that any part of Article 5, Title 5 is invalid, that does not negate the rest of that title. So there is a provision already that basically supports the decision that the Supreme Court, Suffolk County Supreme Court, is a court of competent jurisdiction, has made a determination, and has effectively determined that the public health law is no longer applicable in this arena.
I also just want to, I don't know if it's fair to ask about internal conversations. Probably with legal.
Very often, I'm sorry. Very often case law is limited to the facts given in a particular case, right? As opposed to a systematic statewide change like this. Has anybody given any consideration to distinguishing the holding as is specifically applicable to the facts in the Gilgo case? And that happens in the legal system routinely, where decisions are distinguished based upon the factual account of what's going on in the individual case.
I mean, I think that's something for their legal team to consider.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly.
What I'm saying is that Bev and James are not legal, the legal team, right? So I don't think it's fair to ask them to they can relay that information back, but I don't want them to convey anything that may be privileged conversations they've had with the legal team.
Oh, I'm not asking for conversations with the legal team. I'm concerned that analysis be done before a statewide change of this magnitude is done, because And any attorney arguing a case in any motion in any court in the state, the first thing that they're going to do is take a look at whether or not those facts are directly on point with the issue that you currently have. So yes, there is so looking at that statute that you're referring to with respect to a court of competent jurisdiction, right? That holding is not necessarily not limited to its facts. That's all I'm suggesting, and this is the first I'm hearing of this. So
Yeah.
I would like, as soon as I get done, to read this decision, and then I would like to know what we could do from there. I mean, yes, your legal counsel is one, but we have legal counsel as well, right? So I would ask that we conduct an investigation into the interpretation of the case and whether or not, in fact, I don't think we have jurisdiction over the Department of Health, right? But we do have responsibility to ensure reliability of the forensic testing. So,
And it certainly could affect our reliance on any outside vendors at any
Right.
point,
Yeah.
right? Like it would dramatically change whether we as a commission think any outside vendors should ever be used or certainly used without proper vetting.
I think our jurisdiction is on public forensic laboratories.
One thing I want to note here is this has already been done, correct? So now we have a gap, right? How can we close the gap? I mean, I realize what I'm going to say is a lot more complicated. However, really, this should now be put under the commission, right? I'm going to say what everyone's thinking, probably.
The solution I see is a legislative solution. There needs to be legislation proposed that clearly gives authority to some entity. Whether that be the Department of Health or DCNS, or somebody else. Yeah, or somebody else, it doesn't matter, but there needs to be there needs to be proposed legislation.
but
I think within 995, we do not have that authority.
Right, we do not.
but the Department of Health does. So there is legislation, right? And I understand that the trial court has said that legislation in that case does.
No, there's statute, not proposed legislation. I think that's right. And I will say that it's the inclusion of the private forensic laboratories was an interpretation of the current statute, and there's no explicit language that says that these entities are covered.
I share the concerns that have been voiced, all of them. How long had the Department of Health's interpretation been that forensic identity, private labs conducting forensic identity for results in the state of New York had to get a permit from the Department of Health? How long had that regulatory scheme been going on?
The law was amended I believe it was 1994, and a formal opinion was provided to this committee or this commission, I believe in 1999, 2000. It was a couple of different meetings during that time period. But there was no, this is the first essentially case law that challenged that interpretation.
But for 26 years, the Department of Health has been issuing permits for forensic identity testing.
That is correct.
On the basis, I mean, just echoing what Steve said, on the basis of a single trial court decision has upended 26 years of practice. I mean,
It also feels like dicta was central to the holding. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
well-
so confused.
Right.
I don't think it's just forensic identity. I think it's forensic testing. Period.
Has I'm not asking you to share the communication with legal counsel. However, I'm just going to throw out there that it would probably be a good idea for somebody to take a look at the memorandum in opposition by the defense in that case, because that's going to lay out the arguments. So you have it?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd love to.
Is there any other, Anne, did you have any comments? I wasn't sure. No. Okay.
Just, I don't know where we are on kind of action items here because this is like the first I'm hearing on any of this, so I need to read the case and understand this better, but.
Just information, right? Yeah, this is only informational. This is a Department of Health decision.
Yes, but just, I mean, I think we're all gravely concerned for various reasons. And so I don't know if it's useful to raise this now or wait, but I would want to understand too, what power we as a commission might be able to leverage here to ensure that we are not having a private infrastructure that is completely unregulated stood up to do forensic work. I mean, we have seen that be a disaster throughout the country. So that seems terrible.
It would seem that whatever the effort is going to be for legislation to get this up to Albany should be happening on an urgent basis. And I've seen Albany react in days on bad criminal case decisions, you know, impaired by alcohol as opposed to impaired by alcohol and drugs. That statute was amended within a week of a terrible decision where the defense attorney said you can't prove which one it was, the alcohol or the drugs. So I would imagine that the legislative effort is probably, you're right, the best effort, and it needs to be done on an emergency basis.
I, as a commission, I think there should be some sort of oversight on forensic tests, not just coming from the public forensic labs, but private as well. So if it's not written into it right now, how can it be? What changes? Where can it be? I just feel like if it's no longer going to be under the Department of Health, where is it going? Because right now it's nowhere, right?
Maybe this is a question for our legal counsel, but have we taken a look at the regulations that empower us in light of the determination of the Department of Health to abrogate its regulatory authority? Is there any provision in the existing regulations that would empower us to take action currently without any given the situation?
We can look at the regs. I mean, I think the statute is pretty clear that we do not have that authority.
It doesn't refer to the Department of Health?
I mean, the definition of forensic laboratory for 995 is any laboratory operated by the state or unit of local government. It's
Anne has her hand up.
And
So, Beth, do you have any further clarification as to why DOH, in light of the case law, has dropped the system? Was there any discussion of DOH seeking legislative change, or was it?
I don't think that would be something you would be authorized to discuss. Generally, agencies don't take a position on pending legislation or discuss it before it's proposed by the executive. So if that process were in place, I would think that they would not be able to discuss it here publicly at this time.
Just going back to Matthew, sorry, I'm just processing what you said. There might be an interpretation that since our responsibility is to regulate the governmental labs and the public labs, and as Erin said before, the consequence of what's going to happen is it's going to destroy potentially the public lab system and the integrity of the system, because people are just going to go to the private labs, that we may have some responsibility to act for our protection of the public labs by doing something with respect to the private labs. Just throwing that out there. And I know we're all spitballing because none of us is sitting with the regulations, and this is kind of a sudden piece of information. But there may be some authority that we could assert given the circumstance. I agree, the regulation is clear on its face, but without the Department of Health, I think that regulation is probably implicit that the Department of Health had the authority to do what they were doing, it would seem.
I don't know that we could speculate on that, on why they thought they had the authority. You know, I mean, I think that's their.
And you have another comment? And your hand's still up. Do you have another comment? Okay, Erin.
I mean, would it be goofy for us to like do some kind of formal statement that like this is a big problem, like as a commission, both on the kind of as the people who regulate the vast majority of forensic work, which is done with great integrity by state actors, that the creation or that this will create a vacuum that we are concerned will undermine the system?
I think based on everyone's comments already, that we don't have the information we need yet to make that kind of statement, but maybe further information or a request for further explanation.
Well, I guess I'm not even talking about the Department of Health's decision as much as I'm just talking about any interpretation or ambiguity about whether private labs must have accreditation and be, and have oversight. I mean, I was just thinking, like, if we're thinking a legislative solution is the solution,
something that would basically push that along by saying, like, as the body that ensures the integrity of the state labs, it's deeply alarming that there's not going to be oversight on the private side. And some oversight has to take place, and then they can decide if they want to put it back in the Department of Health, or if another court's going to say that was bonkers, or, you know, but like basically just to make a statement as a commission that it is deeply concerning that private labs will be unaccredited and doing forensic work.
I think people would need to speak with their organizations that they're here representing before they made such a statement. Or some at least would.
Okay.
There's still some, is there any conversation that we want to share? Or, yeah.
My apologies. I was inquiring about some of the facts because that lab was an out-of-state lab. It wasn't a New York State lab. So that seems to me right away to be potentially a limiting issue. So, but we can't resolve it here.
Is there an option? We'll continue the discussion in June. We'll get more information.
Is it worthy to impanel a working group to start working on this right away rather than waiting to the next meeting? We're talking about another 3 months.
I mean,
That's true.
true, but we can't undo what the
No,
Department of Health
We
did.
could
Like,
start,
that
we
part
could
is-
start, but we could start doing what we do with respect to the public labs and figuring out what answers are there, including legislative efforts or anything like that, but between now and the next meeting.
I don't think typically this commission has recommended legislation. I don't think it's appropriate for us or for the commission to recommend legislation.
Maybe not, but we could certainly propose a statement, or we can certainly research the issues.
I think we could do that. I mean, I think members could do that on their own. I don't know that we need a working group to do that. Then we could do what research and inquiry they would like to do in preparation for.
But one of the values that this commission has is this: the legislators were smart enough to have 14 seats that are represented by different stakeholders, and the sharing of that information and the working collectively, a prosecutor, a judge, a defense attorney, lab directors. Those are the kind of people that need to be in the room to look at this, as opposed to different associations coming out with their individual statements. It's one of the powers that we have, is that we're looking at more than just individual interests.
And I see that creating some sort of working group to have a more substantive discussion is going to help the laboratories. I think that it would be beneficial for us to have some sort of guidance. We all got blindsided by this, you know, and I've got texts from other lab directors saying, hey, does this affect me? What is it? Because I know it's been around over 20 years, but some newer lab directors do not. Some younger staff do not know. But this was a surprise to me, and I didn't really understand the full extent of the ramifications either. So anything that we can do as a commission to assist laboratories in understanding the current climate that has been created by this, and you know what we're going to do going forward, I agree that waiting 3 months just in general is kind of long. So if we could, you know, get something together in the interim, I think that any help that we can give to labs would be helpful.
I agree, and after we had a very long discussion on NGS, I can tell you, in my own laboratory, we got an email from a private company who's involved in genetic genealogy with a letter informing us the day after the letter was released. So it was before I had even was able to share it with my supervisors, right? That this was even a thing. So it is very well known in the NGS world. It is out there. So, and at this point, there's nothing that we can do.
I mean, I think forensics is littered with a long history of, not that that organization in particular is charlatans, but people trying to make money doing fast, quick, irresponsible work that, and then, I think prosecutors end up having to clean it up sometimes. Defense bar obviously loves it. And this is not good. This is creating a structure that doesn't have to basically follow the very demanding standards this commission has for lab integrity is a terrible idea.
To be fair, we also got, the DA's offices also got notified. Can't tell if it's the same entity, but it really pertained to genealogy, and it was private labs that are currently do not have a Department of Health permit to do that work in New York State. Trying to solicit business. So but does it mean that they're don't have a laboratory that follows certain rules? It's just they don't have the permit, and historically, DOH has been slow in issuing those permits. And they had to jump through a lot of hoops to get the permits, and so this ruling is sort of an opening for some of those labs. But I don't think those labs should be disparaged in any way for reaching out to us. It's just that they heard about the ruling and wanted to open up lines of communication.
Yeah.
And yes, I don't believe DA's offices would want to use unregulated or unaccredited labs in our work because we don't want to have appellate issues. So I think we're all on the same page on that.
I think that there's a concern about, John Doe's garage lab now opening up, right? Which there's a lot of money involved here, and a lot of different interests. So it wouldn't shock me because I've heard of stories in the past of even in New York State, folks being accused, rightfully so, of operating unauthorized forensic labs. This is historically.
Action or motion on the table. Otherwise, we have quite a lengthy. Okay. All right. Lab disclosures. The first one we have today is the Monroe County Crime Laboratory, and there are 4 disclosures. The first, the laboratory has provided several initial notifications of a closeout to DCJS and ANAB. First was an issue of with the uncertainty of measurement range for barrel and overall length measurements in the firearm section. Reporting of these measurements has been suspended, and amended reports and a notification memo will be issued to the customers with the affected reports. Second notification relates to an unexpected result on a proficiency test due to a typographical error. Since this error was not caught within the review process, the laboratory is investigating. Next is a notification regarding missing evidence. 2 items of evidence cannot be located, and each of these is being investigated. And the final notification was a closeout of the use of unapproved equipment in the seized drugs section, which was first discussed at our December meeting. The policy, procedure, and preparation form were modified, and the cases affected were reanalyzed. If there's any questions on any of these, we do have lab members present virtually. Sorry. Brianna, can you find the Monroe County people for us?
Okay, great. Thank you very much for joining us. I have a question related to the explanation of the laboratory risk determination in relation to the uncertainty measurement. Have you now calculated the known uncertainty for those 28 tests?
Yes.
I'm sorry? You have, okay, so that was the question, because the report had indicated you have the measurement, but not the uncertainty, just changes it. So those reports, once they're reissued, will have the correct uncertainty range, margin.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and any prior report will be referenced in that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Jessica?
Hi. I noticed, and I'm not sure if you've done some thinking about whether the causes are the same, but this measurement uncertainty disclosure related to improperly calculated barrel length, right?
Correct.
I recall that in December, at least it was our December 2024 CFS meeting, there we discussed a different measurement uncertainty issue related to trigger pull measurement uncertainty, which also led to the recalculation and reissuing of 73, I believe, 73 or 75 reports. Is the cause the same? Are they both sort of involving the use of an Excel spreadsheet or not understanding the calculation? Or because these are within a fairly short time period, there are two measurement uncertainty issues related to firearms that are affecting, scores of issued reports.
Basically, as an Excel issue, we took the data on the current one, we took the data from the wrong cell and applied it to the uncertainty formula. And the previous one, we had just failed to change a uncertainty from our calibration form. We used the formula for one thing, and then I failed to change that one number from the uncertainty from the calibration into the new formula. Since then, we now are we have basically started all of these all over again. And now we have 4 people who are trained in doing this, and we all do it together when we're developing all of the new numbers now.
Is this technically reviewed, the measurement uncertainty calculations? Like, why didn't tech review catch this?
It's developed within the laboratory, and now it's being reviewed by other trained people to do it, but it's not something that's reviewed on every report.
So during technical review, are all these cases technically reviewed?
They are, but the uncertainty is kind of a canned answer to what we do. We would add the measurement of whatever we're measuring, and the uncertainty is just basically a canned answer that gets added to the report.
So it's not like a technical reviewer would go back and actually recalculate the measurement uncertainty?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions today for Monroe? Thank you, Monroe. Next is the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Department of Forensic Biology. The laboratory has an initial notification regarding a risk assessment related to male screening. The laboratory moved to a new protocol for Y screening in 2024. It was found that there was an increase in the number of samples that screened negative, and following retesting several cases resulted in male DNA results suitable for comparison. Additional reports were issued, and the lab is continuing to monitor the method. And then secondly, the lab has provided an interim update to their case-to-case contamination investigation, and the laboratory will be working with an expert statistical consultant who can help design and implement a method for continuous evaluation of contamination risk. And we do have the laboratory here today for questions, if there are any.
Good afternoon. Morning, so afternoon.
Whatever.
Yeah, it feels like 3 in the afternoon. So with respect to the male screening method, I had some questions. Back in late 2023 and early 2024, the OCME had issued 3 memos that were helpful to customers, clarifying that this mail screening tool was presumptive and not confirmatory, and warning against, misinterpreting it, which is very helpful for the lawyers, right? This is not a confirmation from that test that male DNA was present. And then I think your last memo actually provided false positive rates and the limited detection for the mail screening method. Were all of those methods concerning the zygum lysis method?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, because the last memo where you provided the false positive and limited of detection information was right before or maybe concurrent with your validation of the QIAGEN Casework Go?
Yeah, so we were still using Zygem when we did that limit of detection study. And then it was shortly after that that Zygem went out of business, and we didn't know that they were going out of business ahead of time. So then we had to find something to quickly put online. Yeah.
So do you know why Zygem, the manufacturer of the reagent, went out of business? Was it a quality issue?
Not to our knowledge, but we just don't know.
Don't know. Okay. So just from, you did a very thorough sort of timeline and step-by-step what your laboratory did. So to make sure I have it correct, in April of 2024, you started validating QIAGEN Go? Casework Go?
I believe we put it online in April 2024.
Put online.
Following validation, yep.
Okay. And when did validation commence?
I don't have that exact date, but it would have been around February or March of 2024.
Right before,
Yeah.
right. And then, according to your root cause analysis, you noted that analysts on the line and quant batch reviewers started to notice an uptick on male quant or male concentration of 0 picograms per microliter, more so than that had been observed with the Zygem. Is that right?
Correct.
So flags sort of went up, your quality systems, like, let's take a look at this?
Yes.
And that was back in September 2024?
Correct.
Okay. And then you actually started collating data in November. You took the first 200 samples under a certain kind of query of sexual assault cases, and then compared how many 0 quants for male concentration you were getting with Zygem as opposed to the QIAGEN Casework Go?
Yeah, it was 200 cases of each, so it was about 1,300 to
Oh, more
1,400 samples for each type. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, yes. And then you did various sort of significance testing, and you found no significance if you looked at like the concentrations at a whole, but when you sort of drilled down to quants that were very close to 0 to 2 picograms per microliter, and 0 to 1 picograms per microliter, you did see a statistically significant difference in the performance between QIAGEN and Zygem?
Correct.
Okay. And that was back in late 2024?
Yes.
Okay. And then you took still another step and actually started doing retesting of casework to see if you would be able to produce male profiles from samples that had registered zero male during the screening test.
Correct.
And in some, well, I was a little confused just about the total number, but was it, this is back in, I guess, December 2024 and January 2025, was it 25 total cases? 7 still came up negative for male DNA. 18 turned out to actually be positive in the retesting. 8 met your laboratory criteria to go on for further testing, AMP, et cetera. And then 2 actually generated male DNA profiles suitable for upload to CODA?
That's correct.
Okay. And that was in late 2024, January 25. Okay. But you continued the work. You spoke to the manufacturer at this point after doing the test at QIAGEN. What did QIAGEN say, by the way, when you approached them?
QIAGEN came and helped us sort of look at potential modifications to the protocol to try to improve recovery, and we worked with them and did an additional performance check of a modified protocol, modifying that protocol, basically.
Did QIAGEN tell you, yeah, you know, a lot of our customers are having this issue, or whoa, you're the first ones to report this, or?
I don't remember us having that specific conversation. The Casework Go is
advertised for multiple purposes, not just mail screening, right? It could be for high throughput, like property crimes or something like that. So there may not be as many labs using it for this particular
the mail
purpose.
screening. Okay. So in March 2025, you started implementing the changes after, and you did a performance check after speaking to the manufacturer, QIAGEN, and okay, how many samples were in the performance check?
I don't have that number with me.
Sure,
I'm sorry.
sure. Yeah. I mean, one of my questions is, I could just ask it now, is about the original validation of QIAGEN Go. I assume you did a sensitivity study and a limited detection study. Did you observe anything during that initial validation that might give you an indication this was going to happen, that you were going to get false negatives?
We did do a sensitivity study. So one of the things that you would typically do in a validation is compare your current method to your new method. But because Zygem had already gone out of business, we couldn't like compare the same exact sample cuttings to Zygem. So that was part of the issue, is that we could see sensitivity and we saw mail going down to where we thought it was. We compared it back to our original Zygem validation that had been done years ago, but obviously it was not exactly the same samples that we were testing, and you can see sample to sample variability. So we thought some of the differences we were seeing was due to that and not necessarily any deficiency in the workflow. And we were seeing mail sensitivity down to a level that we thought was going to be sufficient for our use.
It just didn't translate as much to the actual casework once we started using it. So, we continue to reevaluate our procedures with our quality system, as you mentioned. And
Right, thanks to your analysts and batch actually noticing it in real casework. And you actually did additional testing to sort of monitor the effectiveness of the QIAGEN.
Yeah, we're still wrapping that up now, so you'll get a follow-up on the results of that and any other changes that we're making soon.
Okay. So I appreciated, we did receive a stakeholder notification in December, which didn't include the attached root cause analysis. I don't know if that's something you can share, but it was very helpful because it gave a lot more information that's helpful, I think, in understanding the more limited stakeholder notification. So if that's something that could be put online, I think that'd be helpful. I do have a question about why you didn't disclose this earlier. You've done so much work on the issue back as early as late 2024 or earlier in 2024, or I guess late, right? September on, you started noticing problems, September of 2024, and then rightfully starting testing. But why didn't you send out sort of an initial notification to your stakeholders or the commission?
Well, I mean, we have to investigate and evaluate the situation, and until we have enough information that we can give it out, it's one of those things where we don't want to be putting out partial information that could change at one point. So we have to do what we think is a thorough investigation before we start making disclosures.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I understand, like, maybe not just based on analysts coming to you and saying, hey, this, that would be weird. That would definitely be weird. But as early as, say, November 2024, you had actually done, significance testing in a fairly rigorous way, it seems, right? So I just, frequently we get notifications that are preliminary in nature, right? Saying, we've detected this issue, we are investigating, we want to let you know. And you have done substantial amount of work. I just am very unclear about why you didn't notify us earlier of this.
I understand what you're saying, but we want to ensure that we have as much information to feel comfortable making the disclosure before we eventually make those disclosures.
And just one last thing is, I think your stakeholder notification did say that retesting is available.
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions on that? Or I was going to ask about contamination update, but too little.
I have one quick thing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, applaud the analysts that came forward too. I mean, that's how a laboratory should work. And then your receptiveness to, dealing with the situation. I mean, they really should be thanked too, I think, because they're helping ensure the quality just like everybody else.
They're the ones who are on the front line.
Yep,
You know, they're the ones who are doing this work day in and day out, not the three of us. So we implore them through our training, our coaching, our mentoring, that if they see something, as the adage goes, say something.
Yes.
So they did bring this to our attention, and we looked into it, and here we are.
Yeah, I'll just echo that as well, especially because we do spend so much time yelling at people that they really are to be applauded for going beyond their day-to-day work and noticing a trend, and then the agency following up and uncovering something really important, which is people thinking, in this case, probably sexual assault victims not, having the evidence they need and retesting showing that it was there, in fact. Quick question, just because QIAGEN, is the same company that was involved in the manufacturing errors that also led to false negatives. I think the Texas Commission investigated those a year or so ago. And I'm just wondering, like, if there are other, now that Zygem's out of business, are there other understanding you've done a lot of work and it seems like it's under control, but like, are there alternative vendors if it turns out that this product is not performing the way it should, and or, I don't know, is QIAGEN like, I appreciate they came to try to sort things out, but it seems like they're having a lot of trouble.
I'm not going to speak to that. But,
Are there other vendors if it is not?
There are other vendors, and
Okay.
what wasn't mentioned was that when we got told Zygen went out of business, because we were so happy about that, we did do a comparison.
We had previously done a comparison already, actually, sometimes we do some summer intern projects, right, with some of our research staff to look at new products out there, and we had previously done a look at this product as well as, I think, another product as well from another vendor. But things have to fit into puzzle pieces. Like sometimes the other vendor's product doesn't work with the current quant kit we have online. So we had limited choices as to where we could go with our choices at that time. But we can continue to look at other options as well.
And for this particular method, mail screening, there are several different avenues that labs are employing in order to do this type of triaging. Because again, it's a screening step. It's inherently going to have those risks of a false positive, false negative. It's just a way to screen your results. So there are different methods that laboratories do use in order to achieve that same triaging goal. And we're certainly always looking into what the different options are that are out there and what would be the best fit for our workflow, for our customers, and for our laboratory.
That's great. Wow. Great job at this.
I did want to just ask you about your contamination update as well. As it stands now, is it correct that 56 samples have been affected by the case-to-case contamination from 49 cases involving 15 different criminalists? Is that the current?
Yes.
The current numbers?
That's the current number.
Okay, so nothing between your last notification and today? Okay. And how are those additional instances of contamination detected?
The additional instances were detected by part of our investigation, where we were ensuring that no more victim profiles or elimination sample profiles were found in CODIS. So I think it was mentioned before that we had done certain one-time searches of our ELDIS database to make sure those profiles of victims were not in there, and these additional ones were found in that manner.
What's the status of, I know you were going through a lengthy procurement process to get a statistical consultant. How's that coming?
That's in progress right now. I hate to say it, but it'll be done when it's done, right? We want to ensure that we're putting in over due diligence, in terms of working with them to get the outcome that, or the help that we're looking for. Our quality system, again, is the one that caught this in the first place and kind of set off this chain of events. And, it will always continue in terms of from the bench analyst all the way through to ensure that certain things are looked at. And we look at it a way of downing on that effort to ensure the integrity of the work that we're doing, the integrity of the database and the work that we're putting in. So we are working with that biostatistician, and it's currently in progress. We hope to have something, of substance to come out of it soon.
Oh, wait, but have you actually chosen and hired a consultant?
Yes.
Oh, so they're on board and
Yes,
you're
yes.
current, oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
That
no,
was the
no,
question?
I wasn't clear.
Yes, the procurement process is over. We've chosen, we're
Yep.
working with somebody,
Oh,
and we're in the
fantastic.
progress.
And when did that start?
A little before Christmas.
Yes, we had meetings before Christmas. We shared some data. We have discussions with them, but we don't have a final product yet.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the New York City Police Department Police Laboratory. DCJS and ANAB were notified of an unexpected result on a seized drug proficiency test. The laboratory is evaluating these results and determining why the provider flagged the results. If there's questions for the laboratory, they are available virtually. This is initial notification. Yes, there is. Okay. There we go. The director present.
Hey, good morning. Or good afternoon, sorry.
Good afternoon. Go ahead, Jeff.
1 second.
Yep.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I understand. I know this is only an initial notification with respect to your seized drugs discipline, but it seems to have involved the results of 2 proficiency tests that the provider, the proficiency test provider flagged. And the flag was with respect to differences between how the provider calculates measurement uncertainty and how the NYPD seized drugs unit calculates it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Have you seen, like, the proficiency test provider, right, will have supplied you with their measurement uncertainty values, correct?
That's correct, yes.
How different are they?
Well, what I'd like to say is we're currently wrapping it up. We hopefully will have a letter out next week, so I can give you a brief overview of that. But the way they're different is that for one particular individual, there's different ways of measuring it. But for one particular individual, the provider was using a confidence level of 95%, which our laboratory, when we do uncertainty, we use a confidence level of 99.73%. When you have a different confidence level, it means the range is actually wider. So for us, for one of the examiners, we applied our confidence level, and based upon that they actually had a successful PT. And it was due to the fact that the provider uses a 95% confidence level. So that's for one of them. The second individual was an actual outlier when it came to the analysis. But we had 15 participants in this particular proficiency test, and we used those 15 participants from this laboratory and used the confidence level that we use, which again is 99.73 compared to the provider's 95%. The actual second examiner's data is also good. So our letter, what will come to you probably next week, is going to be stating that based upon our analysis, using our uncertainty, which is different from the provider, and also using the data from those other participants from our laboratory, but using the same material, is that both were successful proficiency tests, but with comments, of course, because they did have unexpected results.
Right. Does the NYPD include measurement uncertainty on the actual laboratory reports, or is it only included in the case file?
It's included in the case file. It's on some laboratory reports when it's close to, say, a weight range in regards to aggregate weight. This, of course, was not aggregate weight. This was purity. And if I can just confirm, I don't recall, is it on the reports or just in the case file for purity?
The uncertainty for these, it's only in the case.
It's only in the case file. It's all in the case file. But the case file, of course, is all part of discovery now, and there's a separate sheet for calculating the uncertainty.
It's been a minute, sorry, since I've looked at a drug case file, but is how the measurement uncertainty arrived at clearly explained in the case file?
It's been a minute for myself. I haven't done a drug case in 20 years. I mean, our SOPs probably reflect it more than maybe what you're stating, but it would have, I assume, the level of confidence and the range that we're talking about. Say, and I'm making this number up, I don't have it in front of me, but say the range is plus or minus 10%, then that would be mentioned in the report. Sorry, not the report, in the case file.
Okay. And have you, I understand the letter's coming out next week. Will it be sent to District Attorney Office and institutional defenders?
So no, the letter won't, that's a communication to DCGS. But what we do is we update the proficiency test results that's provided to the the district attorney's offices. So that's already up there, where it describes what I just said to yourself. The language, I don't have both of them in front of me right now, sorry. But just as I described, it will say proficiency test, see comments, and then the comments explain that we're applying our confidence level and not the providers. And then it also explains that the other person, we're applying the participants from our laboratory in that proficiency test and using our analysis. So it's a little bit more, it's a little bit descriptive as I've described here. And that document is in our LIMS system that is provided when anytime they have to pull out what the proficiency test results for the examiner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions. Next, we have the New York City Police Department latent print section. DCJS and ANAB were notified of an issue with the resolution of print impression images uploaded for searching. The affected cases were identified and the laboratory recalibrated the images and performed new searches. Of the affected cases, 4 were found to have identifications that may have been missed in the original search. And we do have the quality manager here if there are any questions. Yes. And the lab director, I'm sorry.
Did anyone else have questions?
I don't think so.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. To make sure I understand, this is both an initial notification and a closeout. When images of, please jump in if any of my terminology is wrong, but when transferring an image of a latent print between workstations was done a particular way, whether it was saved or not saved, just how you transferred this image, there was some resolution lost depending on how you save the image from 1,000 pixels per inch to 500 for some subset of cases. Is that right?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. It wasn't, there was something within the software that was not recognizing the original calibration, and it was just applying a default calibration that was incorrect.
So this feature of the software would only kick in, though, if something was saved or transferred a certain way?
Yeah, if it was saved to a particular file type.
Okay, okay. So you reviewed images during the time period of September 16, 2024 to December 4th, 2025, and found 520 digital images.
520 cases involving digital images. I actually don't know how many, but there would have been thousands.
Sure, sure. Okay, that makes sense. And you examined 386 cases?
Yes. At this point, we've actually done 392 because we've done a couple since that notification went out.
Oh, are you going to examine all 520?
No, currently we only examine cases, violent crimes, unless there's a specific request to do it. So yes, if those requests come in, then we will go back and do those.
Okay. And you detected, please correct me if I'm wrong, but 22 cases with this 500 PPI lower resolution issue?
Yes.
And the concern with this is that when the lower resolution is uploaded into federal or state databases, it'll essentially cause a false negative. Like because of the lower resolution, you might miss a potential hit.
Correct.
Okay. Is there, please correct me if I'm wrong, but right, you get a candidate match list anyway of what, 10 or how many?
We do 9.
9, okay. So the lower resolution will affect the 9 that are being returned?
Yes.
Okay, okay. But whatever's being returned, it's then given to a latent print examiner to then do a manual examination?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
The New York State Police Crime Laboratory is next. DCJS and A&AB were notified of the closeout of reports being issued with unreasonable timeframes in biology. 4 cases were identified with excessive turnaround times, which were isolated to 1 analyst. Self-imposed methods of case management were reported as the likely cause of the delay. Corrective actions have been put into place to improve time management and to better monitor and detect excessive timeframes for assignments. The lab also notified DCJS and A&AB of an analyst misidentifying sperm cells. Each instance of misidentification had been caught during routine reviews prior to reports being issued. Cases for re-examination were selected and at least 1 item was found to have discordant results. The laboratory is still waiting for resubmission of evidence for additional re-examining of cases. Were there any questions for the laboratory regarding those? Yes. Dr. Dooley?
Hi, so I have just a couple questions on the investigation. So if I'm understanding correctly, there were 5 cases that you pulled in order to do kind of a spot check, given the issue that arose with the 3 cases having wrongly identified the presence of sperm. And of those 5, only 2 were able to, at least as of now, be tested, one of which confirmed the findings, but one of which had discordant results. Is that right?
We've since received 2 additional resubmissions after repeatedly contacting the agency. They had their evidence stored at an offsite location, so we have received a total of 4 out of the 5 cases. 1 was confirmed to be consistent with the original results. 1 was discordant, which prompted our notification. 1 that we just recently received, the retesting is complete. The results were concordant with the original analyst reporting, and the final one is still in progress. We just got it in a few days ago.
So, okay, so actually at this point in time, you have done 4 of the 5, 2 of which are discordant and 2 of which were concordant?
No. 1 was discordant. 2 were consistent, 1 was discordant, 1's in progress.
Right, 2 consistent, 1 discordant, 1 in progress.
Correct.
Okay, so the discordant one you were just mentioning, I thought you said you'd gotten 2 more cases and of those 1 was discordant, but that's the one that is case 3 in the memo that we already knew was discordant, is the one you're referring.
Yes.
Okay, and was it discordant? What do you mean by discordant? Was it the presence of sperm was reported and there was no sperm?
No, the presence of sperm was not observed, and when it was retested, there was sperm observed.
No, it's the opposite.
Sorry.
The analyst originally reported that sperm were identified. Upon retest, no sperm were observed.
Okay, that's what I said. No.
I think you said the opposite.
Okay.
What's she sorry?
Basically the opposite issue at the results level, but the same concern about whether the analyst is accurately reporting the presence or absence of sperm.
Yes, that's what we're currently investigating, is it appears that with the discordant results, the analyst was calling non-sperm cells or cellular debris as potential sperm. So the analyst has been paused in all serology casework and new serology casework. And after retesting is done, the analyst is then given the slide to re-examine. And in the one case, the analyst agreed with the revised findings that no sperm were detected and an amended report was issued.
I think I'm a little bit lost in the review, but maybe when it's closed, it'll make more sense. What are you planning to look at more cases, given that it sounds like a whatever 20%, error rate? So 1 in 5 has turned up a discordance.
Yes. The analyst had, when this first came to our attention in December of 2025, the analyst had indicated they had a 3-week period where they were experiencing non-work related issues and felt that impacted their focus. So we initially looked at all the cases that were still in-house, and then out of abundance of caution, we recalled cases after running a query of our LIMS back to January of 2024. That's where those 5 additional cases were selected. And we just discussed the results of those 5 cases. But the fact that we now have one discordant result, that was where the analyst did the work beyond that 3-week time frame. It is prompting us to, we already ran another query back to 2020, which is when we switched to our LIMS.net system. And we're in the process of reviewing the reported results, the analyst case notes, and other information such as the male quantitation value to select cases that will then contact the agency and request the evidence be resubmitted for retesting. So that is all still in progress as part of our investigation.
Got it. And the cases that you looked at during the 3-week period, then that's different from these 5 cases. And all of those cases, the results were affirming. When you did that re-examination, it affirmed the analyst results within that 3-week window?
We had a number of cases that were in progress in-house. I'd have to go back and look. Some were discordant and some were consistent.
Okay,
those are the initial cases that were in progress when this first came to our attention. The ones that were still in-house in progress in December of 2025.
I'm just trying to understand if that's different from the 3 that are mentioned in the initial part of the disclosure and or from the one that is mentioned in the 5 case review and then the one that was just mentioned now. Are there more than 4 cases with discordant results? I guess that's an easy way to put it.
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Okay. All right. I'm glad to hear you're looking back, and I'll be curious to hear at the update what it shows. Thank you.
Further questions for the state police? Okay, seeing none, thank you. The Niagara County Sheriff's Office Forensic Laboratory is next. The laboratory had provided an initial notification and a closeout to DCJS and ANAB regarding a biology proficiency test that was taken by 2 analysts. One analyst reported an inconclusive result for blood due to conflicting results between a color test and a hemotrace result. Due to a number of participants who reported detecting blood on the item, it appears that there was an issue with the manufacturer's sample prep. Are there any questions for the lab regarding this PT? Okay, seeing none. Suffolk County Crime Laboratory. The laboratory has provided an initial notification to DCJS and ANAB regarding materials trace proficiency test. The result was reported as an association. However, the expected and consensus results were that of an exclusion. And the laboratory has provided a closeout to DCJS and ANAB regarding an unexpected result on a seized drug proficiency test, first discussed at the December meeting. All cases completed by the analyst since 2019 were technically re-reviewed by the section supervisor. Additionally, cases that the analyst technically reviewed since mid-2019 were reviewed. No issues were detected in any of the cases reviewed. The analyst has been removed from casework indefinitely. Any questions for the laboratory? Yes, Suffolk available?
Morning. Morning. Afternoon. Oh, afternoon.
I had a question about your initial notification for the false positive on the proficiency tests in Trace. I saw that I understand it's just an initial notification, but I saw this involved metal shavings. I don't actually know what that is. What is that?
So under our scope of analysis, we have metals, and what they submitted to us in the test were shavings, if you will. Like if you think about chocolate shavings, it was pieces of metal that were shaved off, and they were submitted as separate items.
Okay. And the analyst incorrectly concluded that one of the question items came from the known source when it should have been an exclusion?
Correct.
Has your investigation come up with a reason why, or too early yet?
So we have started the root cause process. We have a planned interview for the analyst upcoming. We have SOP changes in the works, so we're not quite through our root cause and corrective action process yet, but we hope to have it finalized shortly.
How often do you see this kind of case in actual casework?
Very rarely, actually. We don't often do comparative general unknown casework, so that's one of the contributing factors while we investigate this.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next is the Westchester County Department of Labs and Research, Division of Forensic Science. The laboratory has provided an additional document relating to the closeout of an unexpected result on the trace proficiency test first discussed last June. The document provides follow-up on actions taken as a result of the issue. The laboratory has also provided a closeout of items of evidence that may have been affected by water damage, first reported at our December of 2025 meeting. They've completed several actions related to this, including issuing reports for cases that were recut and requantified, and revisiting the protocols and alerts related to the temperature monitoring system. Additional notification was provided to DCJS and ANAB of data transfer issues in the seized drug section. The issues related to the exporting of data, copying and pasting duplicate information, and the technical review of data transfers. Any questions for the lab? I believe members are virtually available. Okay, seeing none, thank you. Westchester County Department of Labs and Research, Division of Forensic Toxicology. Laboratories provided initial notification to DCJS and ANAB regarding an unexpected proficiency test result. An expected analyte, GHB, was not reported due to the case description being overlooked. The lab completed quantification of GHB with an acceptable result. The quantitative result for a second analyte, lamotrigine, was left outside of the provider's acceptable range. The laboratory repeated testing, however, quality control samples did not meet laboratory's acceptability criteria, and the lab is reevaluating their lamotrigine method. During this time, lamotrigine cases will be sent to an outside lab. Any questions for the lab? And if I mispronounce that, okay. My toxicologist friend at the end said I'm good. Okay, seeing none. Yonkers Police Department Forensic Science Laboratory. They've provided an initial notification to DCJS and ANAB regarding unexpected results on an internal seized drug proficiency test. 2 analysts completed the test, and both had results outside of the lab's acceptability criteria for one item. The laboratory is investigating. The laboratory has also provided DCJS and ANAB an initial notification of an error in their measurement uncertainty calculation. This affects reported uncertainty ranges in quantitative reports issued beginning in January of 2014. The calculation has been corrected, and 116 cases were identified as affected. The laboratory is working to determine the correct ranges for these cases and will issue corrections and customer notifications. And the final item from the lab is a closeout notification provided to DCJS and ANAB of lost evidence first discussed at the September 2025 meeting. Item of evidence was pulled into the exhaust of the fume hood. Mesh barriers were installed in all of the hoods, and analysts are reminded to use weights or clips to secure their evidence during analysis. Questions for the lab regarding those 3 items? Karen? Yep. Yonkers is available virtually.
Hi, this is Erin. So I just want to, today seems to be the day of the uncertainty measurement.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So it said 116 cases were found where an incorrect report issued. Is that because those were the cases that were incorrect, or was that all? It didn't seem like it could be all the cases. So some cases did have correct uncertainty measurements reported and others did not, but these are the ones that were bad. Is that correct? Oh, I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I think you're muted.
Cases that were, all of the quant cases that were issued during that time period, they all had the incorrect uncertainty.
They all, okay. And just when you looked at those, I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this because it may be a prosecutor's question, but was the uncertainty measurement such that the correct measurement, might cause, for instance, what looked like a positive result to dip into a negative range, or I'm trying to get a handle on whether it's like, hey, look, we gave a quant, the quant had this measurement bar, but it's not that big a deal because it didn't actually impact what in the legal system is the important question. Now, I understand sometimes weights are critical to the legal question, but I'm just wondering in your review whether any of those cases, like on eyeball, seem to have potential legal ramifications. Again, understanding you're not a lawyer.
So we were able to recalculate the uncertainty and the uncertainty range for all of the cases, and there were 4 cases where the lower limit of the uncertainty now fell below that felony weight charge.
And were those have you done corrective action with those specific cases to notify the defense and the prosecution in those cases, or?
Yes, those were the first 4 that we made notifications on to ensure that information was out there. We issued letters with the correct uncertainty range.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much.
Further questions for Yonkers? Thank you. At this point, we're adding, this is at item 8K, the New York State DCJS Latent Print Laboratory, a closeout of a non-conforming event. Statements or comments? Good luck. All right. And with that, that's the end of our meeting agenda today. The next meeting and date are June 12th, 2026. The location will be determined shortly, hopefully. Motion to adjourn today?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? Thank you. Have a great weekend. We're adjourned.